Welcome to KRQE's New Mexico News Insiders. Here's Gabrielle Burkhart and Chris McKee. Sponsored by New Mexico PBS.
When a natural disaster or a big storm hits, there's one thing or maybe one person that we all turn to keep us informed about what's coming. Chris, wondering, we'd like to think we're a trusted source for news information, you and I.
That's kind of what we do, right?
Yeah. When it comes to learning about changing weather events, though, how bad a storm will be, do you trust your source for that information?
I definitely do. Not just because he's sitting right here in the same room as us, but I really do. When I think about
watch what
weather,
you say.
When I think about weather and staying safe when it comes to where you should or shouldn't go, you turn it on to the folks at television stations, because I know in working in this industry, as well as I think just as a viewer even before I step foot in this industry, the people who do that job are doing it with credibility and the people in mind out there who they're serving that message to. I've always just sort of trusted, like, they're doing this for a reason, and it's just to keep everybody informed. So, yeah.
And I will say, I think that comes with a unique perspective from us, though, because we do get to work like in the building with Grant Tosterud. So for our listeners today, we're going to talk to two highly educated and seasoned experts today about exactly what goes into forecasting and reporting on the weather, the science behind it, and the misinformation that meteorologists across the country are now dealing with as well. So let's bring in our first guest, resident KRQE Chief Meteorologist Grant Tosterud. Thanks for joining us.
I'm so happy to be back again. This is my second time on the podcast now.
I know. First time in the new digital studio, right?
It is, yeah.
That's right. Well, yes, Grant, we've had you on the show before. For those who don't know, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself? What got you interested in weather to make it your career? How do you get to this point where you're a chief meteorologist now here at KRQE?
Yeah, so it's funny if you ever talk to meteorologists. Every meteorologist seems to have some kind of origin story, like a superhero, right? Yeah. For me, I wanted to be a meteorologist ever since I was 8 years old. When I was really young, when I was a kid, I was super scared of thunderstorms or even snowstorms, anything like that. I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota, so we had all types of different weather, from extreme heat to extreme cold, thunderstorms, snow, tornadoes, just about anything except for hurricanes. And I was really scared of that when I was a kid. And then it got to a point where that fear turned into a fascination. I wanted to figure out why the weather was happening the way it's happening, to overcome this fear through education. And that's what I did. I started renting out books from the library at school or going online and researching the weather. And then when I was about 16, I interned at a TV station in Fargo, and that's when I realized I wanted to go into TV and talk about the weather to people every single day and be a part of their lives. And I went to the University of Oklahoma, where I graduated with a meteorology degree. My free time went storm chasing there, so definitely full arc, overcame my fear of thunderstorms by that point. After the University of Oklahoma, I went and worked in a small market in Abilene, Texas for a little over 2 years. And then I ended up here in Albuquerque, thought I'd be here for a couple of years and then move on to a bigger city. But during that time, I had a lot of opportunities to fill in, and I fell in love with the geography, the weather, the culture, the people of New Mexico, and now this is home.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're happy that you've made it your home. I definitely, if you follow Grant on social media too, you love exploring New Mexico, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's what always surprised me about New Mexico is you can go 5 minutes in any direction and the geography changes dramatically. And there's so many nooks and crannies with all the different mountain ranges and all the valleys that you can just travel anywhere and have a whole different experience.
Yeah. Well, coming from Fargo, we know you're not originally from the Southwest, but you have planted roots here in New Mexico now. What first struck you about the weather and just the climate here as opposed to where you grew up?
So when I moved here, I remember people telling me, New Mexico experiences, 300 days of sunshine a year, and the weather is always boring. Why are you going to go be a meteorologist there? Well, I could not say that is... I could say that is so far from the truth. When our area that we cover is almost the entire state of New Mexico and southwestern Colorado, with elevation changes from 3,000 feet above sea level to over 13,000 feet above sea level, over 14,000 feet if you want to include the mountains up in southern Colorado, that there's always some kind of weather happening somewhere across the state. There's always something to talk about. And especially with our geography, it makes it even more unique here, because with all the different mountain ranges, and how I was talking about how the geography can change going 5 minutes in any direction, that creates a lot of really unique microclimates as well. People in Albuquerque know famously the East Canyon wind. That's one of our favorite microclimates. Or if you went out to Balloon Fiesta, you know that even out at Balloon Fiesta Park, they can have their own microclimates there. So, growing up in Fargo, where you could see to the edge of the earth. You could truly see the curvature of the earth. There were no trees unless they were artificially planted in all these fields. The weather was pretty uniform. And every now and then I get a little jealous of meteorologists in other parts of the countries that have these flat geography areas. I'm like, that seems so easy to forecast for now. Because here, you could be talking about 90s down at Roswell and then 3 feet of snow up in the northern mountains. So every day is always different and exciting.
Such a vast difference there for sure. And we know New Mexico's definitely experienced some big weather events, some natural disasters, and just even the past few years when we think about it, wildfires and flooding, those certainly come to mind, especially I think about flooding most recently in the Ruidoso area this summer. So, for example, when you know a big weather event like a fire is growing, what is your process for gathering information and reporting on the weather?
Fires are often the most challenging experiences when it comes to weather, because they happen so quickly, because those days that fires usually spark are very dry and very windy. And that's usually after an already very dry period, so those fires can spread very rapidly. Oftentimes, there's a lot of great sources out there that track this fire information, and we have satellites up in space that can look down and see these hot spots on the ground, so we can track it via satellite. Social media reports are a huge help as well. Just going on social media, everybody's posting about it. You get those eyes on the ground from people who are right there in a situation that's developing so quickly. So a lot of it is just looking at current weather observations, looking through social media, looking through satellite data, and then looking at the forecast as well to see what direction is this fire going based on the wind, and how long could it stick around.
Yeah. And those days, when those days happen, you're usually like reporting in all the TV newscasts, right? Like,
it's an all hands on deck, and it's neat. It's a cool kind of symbiotic relationship too between weather and news, because you have the news side who comes in and they're reporting on the human aspect of it, right? And how this is going to impact people. And that's true for meteorology as well, but we're also there to provide, the informational aspect of it, of what direction is the fire going, and how dry has it been, if there's going to be rain anytime soon, or how windy it is.
And then to that point as well, this is also something that you're tracking throughout the day and the evening, right? You're looking for those changes. It's not just you come in at 1 o'clock, you make your forecast, and then you sit back and wait for the shows. It's something you're checking minute to minute, is what it seems like.
Yeah, all day. I mean, even on a normal day, even today, the first thing I do when I wake up is I look at the weather, I start forecasting, I plan the day out. If you ever watch KRQE, you notice that we're a little bit different than our competitors. We do what we call explainer graphics that really kind of teaches people about the weather. Instead of giving you something that your phone can tell you, we want to make you an educated viewer. And so you can go out and tell people, this is why it's windy today, or this is why this fire is spreading so rapidly today. And so it is an all-day task, from starting in the morning and then watching how those conditions are going to change throughout the entire day.
Wow. And we know, you mentioned it, not everybody gets their news and information or weather reports from just watching local news anymore, right? There's social media platforms. X, formerly Twitter, is also a place people turn to for live updates and breaking news type situations, because you can get often those on the ground eyeballs from wherever the weather event is happening. So I know to an extent it's also important for you to have a presence on these platforms. Say if someone is in a danger zone and they don't have a television, also maybe they're looking for information on these platforms. How often are you trying to reach people on social media outside of just the television?
More frequently than the television, because social media provides me an opportunity to be able to speak with people one-on-one. And it can also be more targeted, because if we're talking about a wildfire, for example, in Ruidoso this last summer, you know, somebody can go on those social media platforms and search Ruidoso wildfire, and they can find the information that they need to find. And then they can also comment or message me on social media, and I can talk with them directly there, providing them detailed information for what they need to know. Because, you know, during our weather, we only have 4 minutes on a busy day, maybe 5 minutes to talk about the entire state of New Mexico. And it's impossibly difficult to try and break that down for people who live on a certain block who's impacted by a fire, for example. So social media is incredibly powerful to be able to get out there and talk with people one-on-one, and the dangers that's coming for them.
Yeah. We know in the event of a natural disaster, and I think we kind of alluded to some of this at the top of the episode, we know working with you and just in this business, you know, the goal is to get out accurate information with it also being immediately as fast as possible, but with that real key focus on accuracy first. And ultimately that goal as well of keeping people safe. But we've also noticed, particularly lately, it sounds like you've encountered a lot of, just as much as we've encountered news skeptics, you could say, there are people you encounter are weather skeptics, people calling into question what you're reporting or what's happening during these weather events, what sort of information, I'm wondering from you, what sort of information are you dealing with? Misinformation are you dealing with? Or do you see other industry professionals dealing with when it comes to meteorology these days?
Yeah. You know, I was thinking about this because it's funny how this has changed so dramatically in the last few years. Weather used to be this thing that it was an icebreaker that you could bring it up. Sure. No, it was not controversial.
It's the water cooler conversation.
It was the water cooler conversation. Exactly.
Yeah,
it was something that when you could bring up and nobody would have a strong opinion about whether it you know, maybe it was, I liked cold weather and you didn't. That was as controversial as it got, right?
Right.
But now it's turned into this conversation that you almost don't want to bring up anymore at the dinner table or at family reunions or even when you're just out at a restaurant or something. And a lot of that has to do with just, I think, the growing popularity of social media and being able to say whatever you want out there and not having anything check your facts or your sources, right?
Yeah, what are the things that maybe you get on a personal level? You know, people hit up you and say, like, you should look into this. This is a weather thing that you're not talking about.
Right. You know, especially recently, it's a lot of it has been tied back to climate change, right? A lot of people having an opinion on climate change. And this is one thing that frustrates me as well, is that this climate change, you know, isn't something that's make-believe. This is something that 97% of scientists agree upon, and there are facts and there are evidence out there. And, you know, so a recent example is how we had the record warmest first half of October on record across most of New Mexico. We had a record warm balloon fiesta. This was after a record warm summer and nearly a record dry summer for many of us across the state too. And I have a lot of people that come out and be like, well, it's record warm right now, but what about, you know, 2 million years ago, the planet was hotter then, you know, the climate is going through these natural cycles. And it's incredibly frustrating to see this, and social media is not the right place necessarily either to have this kind of argument about climate change, for example. But you have these armchair meteorologists out there or armchair climatologists who come out saying that they think that they know what happened 2 million years ago versus what's happening right now. And, you know, to get a little factual here, yes, the climate has definitely been hotter at previous times in Earth's history. I mean, there was a point where Earth was just made up of magma and lava. Of course, it was hotter back then. But there's just undeniable proof of the warming and the climate change that we're seeing right now and what's causing that. And the frustrating part is people not even wanting to look into the science and understand that and how it impacts humans. Because even if it was hotter back then, there weren't nearly as many people being impacted by the heat that we're experiencing now. Yeah. Or the changes that we're experiencing now.
Yeah.
I have to ask you, because, I see people engaging you on social media, and it feels like maybe they just want to call out what you're saying for the sake of arguing.
Right.
But I'm also seeing, like, these bizarre terms that I previously hadn't heard, like Is cloud seeding real, Grant? Have you seen comments like that?
Oh, I've seen plenty of cloud seeding comments, especially in the last few weeks. And yeah, cloud seeding is a real thing. They've done that. They've tested it. I think it's been around since the 70s or 80s. They've done it to try and increase rain in Dubai. They've done to try and increase snowfall across the mountains here in North America. So most people on social media would stop there and then make their own conclusion, right? They'd be like, oh, look at cloud seeding. This is impacting our weather and changing our climate. And, this is the only thing that humans are doing to change our climate. But when you start looking into it and start doing the research, you see that cloud seeding only works if you have the correct antecedent conditions, meaning you already have the moisture in the atmosphere. It's already raining or already snowing. You need that in place first. You can't just go out on a dry day, sprinkle these chemicals into the air, and boom, a cloud appears and it starts pouring rain. You need that moisture in the atmosphere to produce that. And then the article I just read the other day said that, it only works to increase the amount of precipitation by about 5 to 15%. So it's almost negligible.
Mm-hmm. And we know already forecasting the weather is not always spot on, right? Mm-hmm. Meteorologists probably for decades have been called out for you didn't get it right.
Or, my favorite line is we get paid to be wrong. Right.
Okay.
Right. That's
yeah. It's called forecasting because you are trying to figure out what is coming. How much do you engage with people when they do call you out or question what you're telling them?
I'm never afraid to admit that I'm wrong, because forecasting is truly an educated guess. We use the resources we have to put together a forecast that we think is most accurate. That's what your phone does. But as a meteorologist, we take that information and we put our own human touch on it to kind of, forecast models aren't the most accurate, but as meteorologists, we know there's different microclimates like what we have here in New Mexico to kind of make our own adjustments to the forecast.
But how often do you have boundaries yourself for who you will engage with when they call you out?
100%. Because there's people out there who are just doing it for attention, right? They just want to call you out to either get themselves attention or to make it look like you're wrong and try and discredit you. I think it's easy to see who out there is doing it in a harmful way and who's out there doing it in an educational way. And I'm happy to engage with people who truly want to know why the forecast was wrong. And, I think what makes a good meteorologist is to look back and be like, oh, this is what we got wrong. This is the part of the forecast that we messed up on. And what can we do to improve next time?
It feels like talking with and maybe battling back against some of the misinformation there has become a bigger part of your job. If not, maybe saying big part of your job is a little bit much, but it's a bigger part of your job than maybe it used to be. Does it bother you or frustrate you at all to have to deal with that?
100%. You're right. It's not a big part of the job, but it's a large emotional part of the job. It is tough to already go on TV and tell people, try to make everyone happy about what's going on in their backyard, making sure that everybody feels heard and seen. But it's really hard on social media when anybody can start commenting and leave nasty comments sometimes. I've been called a lot of names on social media, and you really do have to have a tough skin to be in this business. It's unfortunate, but it's true. If you have a thin skin, you're not going to last long in TV, unfortunately. So I've learned to deal with this and to develop that tough skin to the point where it doesn't impact my day-to-day. But there are definitely times, especially when we talk about record warm temperatures, that's usually the biggest trigger for a lot of people. Whenever I bring up record warm temperatures or even utter the words climate change, that's when everybody starts coming out of the woodwork and commenting and degrading you and calling you names. And it's incredibly frustrating, 100%, because I want to go out there and I want to educate people. And that's my job. I want to teach people about the weather and tell them how it's working and what's going on. And on social media, it's really, really difficult to do that.
Yeah. I imagine there are times you just got to put your phone away.
100%. There are many times where I just check out. I don't want to look at it anymore. I don't want to engage. I'll post something and then I'll never look back at it ever again.
All right. Well, is there anything that you want people to know about, maybe a common misconception that you hear from viewers, or that you just want people to understand better now that we've got you?
Ooh, that's a great question. I want people to give meteorologists a little grace. don't hear conspiracy theories out there and assume that they're true. I really want everyone to go out there and do their research. Now, some of that research is not accessible to the general public. Not meaning that you can't access it, but it's wordy, it's complicated. There's a lot of meteorological or climatological jargon that doesn't make a lot of sense. But there are also some fantastic resources out there, and you should go and take the time and educate yourself because it's really fascinating and it impacts all of us. That's one of the reasons why I love talking about the weather, because it impacts every person out there, and it's this shared experience that we all have. And it would be nice to go back to that point where weather is no longer something that people stray away from talking about. I want it to go back to being something that we can talk about over the dinner table again, or that unites everybody again without it turning into something controversial.
Mm-hmm. Well, we appreciate the work you do, Grant, and I think that it's a cool first full circle moment that you went from a frightened child to now trying to inform other people about why things are happening in the world. So we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We'll be right back, and when we return, a conversation with a KRQE alumni who's been doing some national reporting for some major weather events.
Hi, I'm Monica Wicki, host of New Mexico Living. This episode of New Mexico News Insiders is sponsored by New Mexico PBS. If you enjoy New Mexico News Insiders, check out New Mexico in Focus, a great source for insights about what's happening in our state. Catch their podcasts and videos at nmpbs.org or stream it anytime, anywhere on the free PBS app. Now, let's continue to New Mexico News Insiders.
And we are back here, this time with Kristen Currie, a KRQE alum and also a meteorologist, now with our sister station in Austin, Texas. That is KXAN. Kristen, thanks for being here, taking the time to chat with us about this.
Of course. Good to be with y'all.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to start with recapping your career path. We know you, of course, from being here at KRQE, as we mentioned, and our New Mexico listeners may remember you as well from your work here between 2014 to 2019, about 5 years. How did you get into the business? What got you interested in weather?
You know, it's interesting because I grew up in Southern California where there really wasn't much weather, and I didn't have a whole lot of exposure or experience to that. But when I went to college at the University of Colorado at Boulder, I went in with an undeclared major thinking science was my passion, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with that. And then after 4 years there, experiencing what real weather is like, I took an internship my junior year with a TV station. I just needed some sort of science internship, and there was one in the weather department that opened up. And so I applied and was blessed to get that position and loved it and stayed for 2 years as an intern. Yeah. And then eventually made my practice real, and I got my first gig, my first TV job in Lubbock, Texas. I was the morning meteorologist there at our sister station, the ABC affiliate in Lubbock, Texas. And then from Lubbock, Texas, I jumped over to Albuquerque, and I was the morning meteorologist at KRQE from 2014 to 2019. And then after just over 4 years, I came to Austin here at the NBC affiliate, our sister station. So I've been within the company for a while and been on TV doing weather for over a decade.
Right on.
Yeah. And Kristen, I wanted to talk to you on multiple fronts. One, obviously, our New Mexico community is still, you're a beloved, KRQE meteorologist from here. And I know a lot of people miss you. But you were also recently dispatched to Florida to cover the hurricane there for all of our Next Star stations. So people across the country were getting to see your reports. Let's start there. Can you tell us just what that experience was like? And for those wondering, why would they send a meteorologist from Austin, Texas to Florida to cover the hurricane?
Yeah, good question. You know, I really didn't do a whole lot of tropical meteorology when I was forecasting in New Mexico, but in Austin, in Texas, we obviously are influenced a little bit more by tropical storms and hurricanes. We here in Texas had Hurricane Beryl that moved through late June into early July. And although Austin didn't see anything, we had sent some people down there from our station to cover it. Now, when it comes to a storm elsewhere outside of the viewing area, in the case of Hurricane Helene, which is the storm that I went to cover, we have a sister station in Panama City, which is very far into the Florida Panhandle. And we have one in Tampa, which is a little bit further down the peninsula. We knew Hurricane Helene was going to come in the middle, right there in the Nature Coast, where it bends from the Panhandle to the peninsula of Florida. And we just didn't have anybody there. And the thought process behind dispatching and deploying another meteorologist was, okay, we want to make sure that our Panama City station is focused on their viewers, their impacts, and how this storm is going to hurt their community. Same thing with Tampa. We knew Tampa was going to see big storm surge. We knew that this hurricane was going to have some big impacts to Tampa. We wanted them solely focused on their viewers and making sure their reporters or meteorologists weren't having to worry about other stations, other impacts. And so they had reached out to my station, because we do have a lot of tropical experience ourselves in covering that, and said, are you willing to go? We need someone to report for the other stations. And I said, sure. And that's kind of the reasoning behind it. I went because I knew Austin was not going to be affected. We were not going to see any sort of big time weather influences from this system. So they said, while the weather's quiet at home, would you mind deploying out to that middle spot where we don't have any station and doing live reports for the other 100 plus stations we have within the company, so that way Tampa can stay focused and Panama City can stay focused. It wasn't attention seeking. It wasn't ratings grabbing. I mean, we're talking about people that I've never met, anchors that I've never met, communities that I've never met, but we did it because we know it's important that the information gets out, and we know that people have friends and family who live elsewhere outside of their community. And it was great experience. This isn't my first hurricane that I went and covered. I had Hurricane Delta in 2020, our most active hurricane season on record. But there's also a lot of research that goes into it. I think people have this interpretation of we just kind of get in the car and drive.
Yeah. And to that point, I think we wanted to talk to you about, walk us through your process during breaking news weather, like a hurricane or a tornado. What are you doing behind the scenes leading up to those on-air reports?
When it comes to something outside of the viewing area, like Hurricane Helene, we knew we were going to be deployed to Tallahassee. It's making calls. It's making sure that there's a hotel nearby that has, in the case of Florida, before 1992, before Category 5 Hurricane Andrew, there wasn't as strict of building codes. After 1992, they revamped all of that. So we're looking for a hotel that's built after 1992. We're looking for multiple stories for that hotel that we're going to stay in. We're looking for a parking garage that we can evacuate to if flooding becomes an issue. So that's more so if I'm going out to a story. In the case of weather that I'm covering impacting my community, it's more of, okay, if this tornado gets close to my station, A, do my coworkers know where to go? B, do we have a backup plan if we lose all sorts of power? Most of the time, TV stations use generators, which is how we're able to stay on air if the power outages go out, whether it be winter storm, if not, something else. But there's a lot of prep work that goes into us just covering the storm on TV. Usually we get a little bit of a heads up. With the hurricane, we get a lot of heads up. We know multiple days in advance where this storm will go. Tornadoes are obviously a little bit more of a shallower window for preparation, but we know going into a day if it's severe weather's likely what the plan would be.
And we know just from knowing you, Kristen, that you have a large social media following, and I know that you do make yourself available to your community on those platforms as well, and also in person, doing like school visits, getting kids interested in STEM, which I think is really cool. We talked to Grant Tosterud earlier about this because we're also noticing just the amount of misinformation that meteorologists are now having to address on other platforms aside from just their local news reports. What have you noticed in that realm, Kristen?
I mean, I think there's always been a little bit of tongue-in-cheek of like, the weatherman's always wrong, right? It's just a guessing game. And some of that you just kind of accept as people take us as the punching bag. It is what it is. But since I would say the last couple of months, there has been a lot of that mistrust, this idea that we're being intentional and manipulative with what we're saying. And I honestly don't know where that's come from. I don't think the political landscape right now is helping. Everyone seems to be a little bit emboldened by just sharing whatever they want to share on social media, regardless of consequences and if it's going to impact someone a certain way. But I have noticed that, and I, after 10 years in the business, have embraced I am who I am, and I am a little bit more outspoken and less fearful of the feedback and the whiplash I'll get if I say something that people wouldn't like, but I want to speak my truth and speak, you know, what I believe in and what the facts are. And that's what I do on my social media.
Yeah. We also know, just from working with you and talking with Grant as well, the viewer feedback, that can be a heck of a lot different. And particularly when it comes to whether it's a news person or whether it's a weather person, but also I think gender comes into this as well. Males versus females, men versus women. You know, there's a very vast difference that I can even say as a male who's worked in news versus, you know, my coworkers who are women. You just see quite a tremendous difference in how people interact with you based on what your gender is. What kind of viewer feedback do you get as a woman meteorologist, and how do you handle that?
I would say, I mean, 90% of the quote unquote hate mail I would get would be appearance. Easy. Just, you know, and unfortunately, it was worse in New Mexico than it was in any of my other markets. But it's people feeling emboldened behind that keyboard to say what they feel about my dress, how it fits, how I do my hair, how I speak. I mean, it's anything and everything. And in the first few years in the business, obviously that hurts. You know, these are strangers who feel entitled to tell you everything they feel about you and how you look. Now it's more of just, you know, it's people having a bad day, and that's kind of how I knock it up. It's someone's unhappy about something else, and I'm the easy punching bag. I'm the easy target. And if they're ever going after my credibility, my knowledge, my education, I will fire back immediately. Like I will get back on there and I will say, you know what, here's why I'm here, here's what I do, and here's how I got here. I deserve to be here because I earned my way here. If it's anything to do with my outfit, delete. Anything to do with my weight, my height, delete. I don't even waste my time on that. I will say the misinformation piece that's been bubbling up over the past couple of weeks, cloud seeding, hurricane patterns, all those kind of things. I have went back and replied to those on social media because I think as a meteorologist and someone who's studied this for years, I feel like I have a duty to say, hey, that what you're reading and wherever you're getting this from is not accurate. It's not true. Let me speak my truth and say this as a scientist, that is physically impossible for a human to manipulate a hurricane. You know, it's never going to work. Or even people saying, you know, you control the weather. Listen, if I controlled the weather here in Austin, Texas, we wouldn't be doing 90 days of 100-degree temperatures. You would know if I'm controlling the weather, okay? And it's just, we do not have that capability.
Is that one of the things you've heard? Like, what are some of the outlandish, I guess, misinformation claims that you heard covering Hurricane Helene, you know, and being in that sort of national spotlight, reporting on a big disaster like that?
So I would say there's 2 to almost 3. One being cloud seeding, you know, which is a thing, and states use those. You know, there are specialized planes that will put sometimes even just table salt or silver iodide, and they're feeding these clouds nuclei, ice crystals, for these super cooled raindrops to cling to and fall. They're doing that, and a lot of the times I've noticed, I just read a study that Utah is doing this for snowfall. They're trying to enhance snowfall because with a changing climate, we're seeing these longer droughts and lower snowpack. But the effect of that is it's only about, nobody was saying it's 25% enhancement with a shower. So it's like, it's very minor. It's not wide scale. It's very localized. And there's not quite a general consensus on, does this work effectively 100% of the time? There's still a little bit of research that needs to be done. Is this effective? Can we really rely on this kind of research? But it is being done. So the cloud seeding is one. Can you cloud seed a hurricane? No. Can you cloud seed a sunny sky? Absolutely not. There needs to be a shower there already for you to just enhance. You're just adding a little bit more fuel to the fire, if you will. The other one's are hurricane patterns. And this is one that I think some of the politicians picked up, which is unfortunate that it's not just left to the scientists. But hurricane patterns tell nothing about effectiveness, use, whether it's even been a thing. It's just a legal document. It's, I have an idea, I have an invention, I want to make sure that no one else claims it. You get the stamp and that's it. It has nothing to do with how we actually been doing this. Now, did we try back in the 1960s to try and weaken hurricanes by dropping some chemicals in there to try and disrupt the organization. Yes, but it didn't work. We said these things are too powerful. I mean, you think about the energy that one hurricane would produce. It's just massive, and especially the big hurricanes, something like Helene in Milton. I mean, these are massive energy makers, to the fact that I remember studying Hurricane Andrew, that Category 5 in Florida, 1992. The energy estimated that Hurricane Andrew put out was 5,000 times all of the electric grids in the world. The entire worldwide energy capacity, 5,000 times that was Hurricane Andrew. So there's no way as humans we have the energy, the capability, the tools, technology to influence hurricanes by any stretch.
How do you choose who? I know I've chatted with you offline about this, but how do you choose like who to engage with about this weather, specifically weather misinformation that's floating around now?
I think it's about the tone. If you come at me and say, well, you're wrong, HAARP is doing chemtrails, it's like, okay, no, like we're not going to engage in that. If it's somebody coming out and saying, hey, I saw someone post about HAARP, what is that and what do they do? You know, that would be my opportunity to say, I'm so glad you asked. HAARP actually studies the ionosphere, which is 50 miles from the surface, and our weather stays within the first couple of miles from the surface. They're not connected. They're not anything that would overlap. That would be my opportunity to go on there and educate. But if it's toxic, if it's accusatory, if it's something that they'll come at me with, all you're doing is lying, and this is why. No, I'm not going to waste my time trying to persuade someone stubborn enough and rude enough to come at me in that way.
Do you see this new realm of addressing misinformation as just part of the job now? It does feel a little bit more recent, prevalent, and I imagine as well it kind of gets exhausting dealing with some of it. But yeah, do you feel like this is just part of the job now?
I do. I think over my 12 years, almost 12 years in the industry, every year we seem to be going more and more digital. There's more of a digital focus, whether that's social media or website or emails and all that kind of thing. So I think digital definitely opens us up more to the public and the viewers to connect with us more, but there is that downside of them being able to just say whatever they want. And so I do think misinformation is going to be part of the job, but I like to think of it as turning it around and saying, okay, well, this is a teachable moment. If I get 3 or 4 emails about, someone saying, well, what is NEXRAD? I see NEXRAD is controlling hurricanes. What is that? I can go in there the next day and be like, hey, I got some emails about this. NEXRAD is actually just a network of radars that we use to find raindrops and snowflakes. Like something like that, where I'm kind of putting out the fires as I go, but it's also something that people can take away while watching the weather, especially when we hit these stretches where there's not much weather. I like to use those moments to take kind of the yucky stuff that I'm getting and saying, okay, well, if you think this isn't actually what it is, here's what I want you to know.
And we know from knowing you that you're passionate about, your career, and this is why you're still at it. Anything that you want people to better understand while we've got you?
I think what I would tell people just maybe listening, or if they would come up to me in the grocery store, like what is the one thing that people don't realize? I think that most people don't realize how much work we do put into a forecast. Like we're getting up early, like this morning, my alarm went off at 1:45 in the morning to get to work by 2, to make that forecast, to manipulate every graphic that I wanted to show on TV, to make sure every number matches on the website and on our weather app. And there is a lot of work that goes into it, backed on years of education and years of experience. It's not just something we walk in and there's numbers that we just pull off of a computer and throw it on a map. That's not how it happens. There is a lot of analyzing and there's a lot of math and science behind to it. And then I think the second thing I would add is I'm in the classrooms quite a bit. That my love language is teaching people about weather. And I would say this misinformation, this mistrust of meteorologists, it's not in the younger generations at all. It's like these kids want to learn about weather. They want to know what makes a hurricane. They want to know why a tornado spins a certain direction. I think the critics are louder for sure, But the people who truly want to understand weather, and I think everyone has a general curiosity about weather, that's still why I do it. And I think that's still why the majority of meteorologists do it. We're just trying to put out the bad apples, if you will. But the passion and the love is still there. And especially with the younger generation, I think, we're on the right track. We just got to make sure that the little speed bumps of, well, you control the weather, that those go away.
That sounds like one of the most rewarding parts of your job is that teaching component of it. But just to ask you, what is the most challenging and by contrast, the most rewarding part of the job?
Challenging would be, it is a very humbling job. If you get the forecast wrong, everybody will tell you. If you get the forecast right, nobody will say a thing, and that's just the nature of the business. The viewer feedbacks can be hard because your biggest insecurity, they'll let you know. Even if you didn't know it before, you will now be insecure about something, especially when you're starting out in news. But the most rewarding for me is definitely going to those classrooms and teaching kids about weather. Because like I said, weather impacts everyone. So whether you care about it or not, truly you're impacted. So you got to care a little bit. You want to know if you're going to get rained on or if there's going to be something that hurts you, life, property, those kind of things. And I've noticed even here in Austin with, TV ratings, overall the business is changing. And people say, well, TV is a dying industry. We get one tornado that drops down in the viewing area and our ratings spike because people get panicked and they want to know. And that's why we're there, and we would never go on TV just for ratings. We're already there. We're there on the sunshine days. We're there on the tornado days. So we're just happy that we can provide that comfort for people when it does get scary because we know we're doing our jobs.
Kristen Currie, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. We appreciate it.
Of course, good to be with you. And I was back in Mexico about a week ago, so I do miss everybody there. I miss the food the most. Holy moly, but it's so good to be chatting with you guys today.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you.
We'll be right back with more on New Mexico News Insiders.
Hi, I'm Logan Rader, host of New Mexico Living. New Mexico News Insiders is sponsored by New Mexico PBS.
If you like New Mexico News Insiders, learn more about New Mexico in Focus, a weekly hour-long show analyzing decisions impacting New Mexico statewide. Stream it anytime, anywhere. Visit nmpbs.org and follow them on all social media platforms.
Now back to New Mexico News Insiders.
Again, a thanks to Grant Tosterud, our KRQE Chief Meteorologist, and as well our KRQE alumni, Kristen Currie over there at KXAN in Austin, and next our sister station. Hope this was an illuminating conversation for our viewers about the work that they do and also some of the challenges, obviously, they're facing now increasingly. The misinformation side of things isn't really just all about newsrooms now. It's, well, the weather's always been a part of the newsroom, but you know what I mean. It's very much ventured into their realm as well.
Yeah, and just, for our own viewers and listeners, the two of us know how passionate Grant and Kristen are about their careers and about just informing the public when something dangerous is happening in their communities. Just really good people on top of good meteorologists. So we appreciate their time. If you all have any story ideas or people you'd like to hear from on our show, feel free to reach out. I'm Gabrielle.Burkhart@krqe.com via email and gburknm on social media.
And I'm at Chris McKee TV and Chris.McKee@KRQE.com. Don't forget, you can watch the full edition of New Mexico News Insiders on our YouTube page and also KRQE.com/podcasts. Thanks for listening.